She looked at the stain on her $3,000 dress, then up at the black man standing frozen with his empty cup. Her eyes narrowed, not seeing the tired hero beneath the suit, but only a target for her rage. "You people!" she hissed, loud enough for the entire first-class lounge to hear. "You shouldn't even be in here." Beatrice van der Hoven thought she had the power. She thought her husband's money and her platinum status made her untouchable. But at 35,000 feet, cash doesn't buy miracles. When her son's heart stopped beating over the Atlantic, Beatrice would realize that the man she humiliated was the only one who could decide if she landed with a child or a corpse. This is the story of how karma didn't just knock, it kicked the door down. The air inside the Sapphire Lounge at JFK Airport smelled of expensive espresso and old money. It was a smell Beatrice van der Hoven loved. It smelled like safety. It smelled like she was better than everyone else. Beatrice adjusted the strap of her Hermes Birkin bag, the limited edition Himalayan crocodile one, for which she had bullied her husband, Richard, for 6 months to acquire. She tapped her manicured nails on the marble countertop of the bar. "Chardonnay. Okay. And if it's domestic, don't bother pouring it," she snapped at the bartender, a young woman named Chloe, who looked like she was holding back tears. "Of course, Mrs. van der Hoven," Chloe whispered, pouring a glass of French white that cost more per bottle than Chloe made in a shift. Beatrice grabbed the glass without a thank you and turned sharply, her eyes scanning the lounge for a secluded seat. She hated when the lounge was crowded. It made the exclusivity feel diluted. She spotted a singular empty leather armchair near the window, overlooking the rainy tarmac. She began to march toward it, her heels clicking a rhythmic warning on the floor tiles. Standing in her path was a tall man. He was black, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal grey suit that was well-fitted but slightly rumpled, as if he had been wearing it for 20 hours straight. He was rubbing his temples with one hand, holding a paper cup of black coffee in the other. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weary that sleep doesn't easily fix. He shifted his weight just as Beatrice tried to brush past him to claim the chair. The collision was minor, but the physics were unforgiving. His elbow bumped her forearm. Her Chardonnay sloshed violently, sending a wave of sticky, golden liquid cascading down the front of her cream-colored cashmere sweater and splashing onto the hem of her white silk trousers. The lounge went silent. The man blinked, pulling his headphones down around his neck. "Oh my goodness, I am so sorry," he said, his voice deep and raspy with fatigue. He immediately reached into his pocket for a handkerchief. "I didn't see you there, Mom. Let me help you." "Don't you touch me!" Beatrice shrieked, jumping back as if his hand were covered in acid. She looked down at her outfit, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She looked back up at him, her eyes scanning him from his scuffed dress shoes to his tired face. She didn't see the exhaustion. She didn't see the intelligence in his eyes. She saw a demographic. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she hissed, her voice rising an octave. "This is cashmere, real cashmere, not the synthetic trash you're used to." The man stiffened. He slowly put his handkerchief away. "It was an accident. The lounge is crowded. I'll be happy to pay for the dry cleaning." Beatrice let out a cruel, barking laugh. "You? Pay for this? This outfit costs more than your car. Probably more than your rent." She took a step closer, invading his personal space. "This is the problem with these diversity quotas. They let anyone in here now. Just because you scraped together enough miles or got some affirmative action upgrade doesn't mean you belong." People were watching now. Businessmen lowered their Wall Street journals. A couple in the corner stopped whispering. The man took a deep breath. His name tag was hidden beneath his lapel, but his posture shifted from apologetic to rigid. Ma'am, I'm offering to help. There is no need for personal insults. I'm a passenger just like you. You are nothing like me, Beatrice spat. She turned to the lounge manager, a stout man named Mr. Henderson, who was rushing over. Mr. Henderson, finally! Beatrice pointed a shaking finger at the man in the grey suit. This person assaulted me. He threw coffee on me. The man looked at his cup. It was still full. I didn't throw anything. We bumped into each other, and it was your wine. He's drunk, Beatrice lied, her voice piercing. He smells like alcohol and he's stumbling around. I want him removed. Now! He's a threat to my safety and the safety of my son. She gestured wildly toward a boy sitting quietly on a nearby sofa. Arthur, her 10-year-old son, looked up from his iPad. He looked pale, dark circles under his eyes, shrinking into his hoodie as his mother made a scene. He looked embarrassed. Mr. Henderson looked at the man in the grey suit, then at Beatrice. He knew Beatrice. She spent thousands a year with the airline. Sir, Mr. Henderson said, his voice tight. I'm going to have to ask you to move to the other side of the lounge. We don't want any trouble. He shouldn't be moving to the other side, Beatrice screamed. He should be in the terminal with the rest of the cattle. Look at him. He's probably here on a stolen pass. The man looked at Mr. Henderson, waiting for the manager to defend him, to point out the cameras, to point out that Beatrice was hysterical. But Mr. Henderson just looked at the floor. Sir, please, Henderson said softly, just to keep the peace. The man in the grey suit looked at Beatrice one last time. His expression wasn't angry anymore. It was something worse. It was pity. I hope your day improves, ma'am, he said quietly. He picked up his bag, a battered leather satchel that looked decades old, and walked away, heading toward the exit rather than the back of the lounge. That's right, run away, Beatrice yelled after him. She turned to the stunned room, smoothing her stained sweater. Honestly, you have to police these people or they take over everything. She walked over to Arthur, who hadn't made a sound. Mom, Arthur whispered, his voice dry. I don't feel good. Oh, stop it, Arthur, Beatrice snapped, dabbing at her stain with a cocktail napkin. I'm the one who's been attacked, and you're complaining. Drink your water. We're boarding in 10 minutes. I need another drink. She didn't notice that Arthur didn't drink his water. She didn't notice the sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. She was too busy texting her husband about the thug she had just put in his place. Flight 882 to London Heathrow was a behemoth of an aircraft. The first-class cabin was an enclave of soft leather, warm lighting, and hushed tones. Beatrice marched down the jet bridge, dragging Arthur by the hand. The boy was stumbling slightly, his feet dragging. Pick up your feet, Arthur, she muttered. Stop acting like a baby. They reached the door of the plane. The flight attendant, a cheerful British woman named Sarah, greeted them. Welcome aboard, Mrs. van der Hoeven. Seat 1A and 1B. Yes, Beatrice said, pushing past her without making eye contact. She shoved her carry-on into the overhead bin and settled into 1A, the prime seat. Arthur slumped into 1B next to her. Beatrice ordered a pre-departure champagne immediately. As she sipped it, waiting for the rest of the first-class cabin to fill up, she felt a shadow fall over her seat. She looked up, and her glass nearly shattered in her grip. It was him, the man in the grey suit. He was walking down the aisle of first class, checking his boarding pass. He stopped at seat 2A, directly behind her. Beatrice's jaw dropped. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, blocking the aisle. Excuse me? She said, her voice dripping with venom. What do you think you're doing? The man looked up from stowing his battered satchel. He paused, closing his eyes for a brief second, as if praying for patience. I am sitting in my seat, ma'am. This is first class, Beatrice said slowly, as if speaking to a toddler. Economy is that way. Past the curtain. Keep walking. I know where economy is, the man said calmly, and I know where 2A is. Excuse me. He tried to squeeze past her, but Beatrice slammed her hand against the overhead bin, barring his way. The cabin went silent again. "Sarah!" Beatrice shouted. "Sarah, get the captain!" Sarah came rushing over, her smile faltering. "Is there a problem, Mrs. van der Hoven?" "Yes, there is a massive problem," Beatrice pointed at the man. "This man assaulted me in the lounge, and now he's sneaked into first class to harass me. I want him off this plane. I do not feel safe." Sarah looked at the man. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" The man silently handed it over. Sarah scanned it. It was legitimate. 2A. Full fare. "Mrs. van der Hoven," Sarah said gently. "This gentleman has a valid ticket for this seat. The doors are about to close. We need to take our seats." "I don't care if he has a ticket," Beatrice yelled. "He probably stole it, or used stolen miles. Look at him. Does he look like he can afford a $12,000 ticket? He looks like a janitor." The man's face hardened. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I assure you, I paid for my ticket. Now, if you'll let me sit, I'd like to get some sleep." "I am not sitting in front of a criminal." Beatrice turned to the other passengers, seeking allies. "Can you believe this? They let anyone in here. He's going to rob us while we sleep." A man across the aisle, a heavy-set Texan, grunted. "Sit down, lady. You're holding up the flight." Beatrice turned purple. "I am Beatrice van der Hoven. My husband is Richard van der Hoven of Archer Capital. I will buy this airline and fire every single one of you." "Ma'am," Sarah said, her voice dropping the customer service sweetness. "Sit down, or I will have security escort you off. This is your final warning." Beatrice stared at Sarah, then at the man. She realized she was losing. She huffed, a sound of pure indignation, and slammed herself back into her seat. "Fine," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. "But if anything goes missing from my bag, I'm suing the airline and having him arrested." The man in the grey suit said nothing. He sat in 2A, buckled his belt, and opened a thick medical journal. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. He just put his headphones back on and closed his eyes. Arthur, in seat 1B, let out a soft whimper. He was curling into a ball, clutching his stomach. "Arthur, stop whining," Beatrice hissed, aggressively flipping through a magazine. "Mummy has a headache." 2 hours into the flight, the cabin was dark. Most passengers were asleep, reclining in their lay-flat beds. The only light came from the dim blue LEDs along the floor and the glow of Beatrice's screen as she angrily typed an email to the airline's corporate office. The plane shuddered slightly. Mild turbulence, but the real storm was brewing in seat 1B. Arthur had been quiet for the last hour. Too quiet. Beatrice finished her email and looked over at him. "Arthur, do you want the chicken or the pasta? The hostess is coming around soon." Arthur didn't answer. He was facing the window, his small body trembling. "Arthur!" Beatrice reached over and shook his shoulder. "Don't ignore me when I'm talking to—" When she touched him, her hand recoiled. He was soaking wet. She pulled him toward her. Arthur's head lolled back. His skin was grey, clammy, and cold to the touch. His eyes were rolled back in his head, showing only the whites. His breathing was shallow, raspy, and incredibly fast. "Arthur?" Beatrice's voice trembled. "Arthur, baby! Wake up!" He didn't respond. He let out a low, gurgling sound. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Beatrice's alcohol-induced haze. "Arthur!" She unbuckled and stood up, screaming, "Help! Something's wrong with my son! Help me!" The cabin lights flickered on. Sarah and another flight attendant, Michael, came running from the galley. "What is it?" Sarah asked, kneeling beside seat 1B. "He won't wake up. He's cold. Oh my God, he's not breathing right." Beatrice was hyperventilating, grabbing Arthur's limp hand. "Do something. Call an ambulance." "We're over the ocean, Mom," Michael said, his voice tight. He checked Arthur's pulse. "Pulse is thready and racing. Skin is diaphoresis. Sarah, get the medical kit, now." "Is he dying?" Beatrice shrieked, clutching her pearls. "Don't let him die. He's all I have." Sarah ran to the intercom, her voice echoing through the entire plane, waking up 300 passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We have a medical emergency on board. If there is a licensed physician on the aircraft, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately. Repeat, we need a doctor immediately." Beatrice sobbed, rocking back and forth. "Please, please, please." 30 seconds passed. Silence. "Where are they?" Beatrice screamed at Michael. "Why isn't anyone coming? This is first class. Someone here must be a doctor." Michael looked around the cabin. The Texan man looked away. A young influencer in 3A just stared with her mouth open. No one moved. "Is there no one?" Beatrice wailed. "My son is dying." Then, from seat 2A, there was the sound of a seatbelt clicking open. The man in the grey suit stood up. He hadn't been asleep. He had been listening. He stepped out into the aisle, his face unreadable, his eyes sharp and alert. He looked down at Beatrice, who was kneeling on the floor, her mascara running down her cheeks. "I'm a doctor," he said calmly. His voice was the only steady thing in the chaos. Beatrice looked up. Her eyes widened in recognition, and then, in a twist of insanity born of prejudice, she recoiled. "No!" she yelled, shielding Arthur with her body. "Not you! I want a real doctor!" The man froze. Sarah looked at Beatrice as if she were insane. "Mum, he's the only one who stood up!" "He's a liar!" Beatrice spat, hysteria taking over. "He's a janitor. He's a thug. He's probably going to hurt him. Get him away from my son. Get a European doctor. Get someone who knows what they're doing." The man in the grey suit didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just looked at the boy. He saw the grey skin. He heard the stridor in the breathing. "Mum," the man said, his voice dropping to a command tone that brooked no argument. "Your son is going into shock. Judging by the pallor and the respiration, he likely has minutes before cardiac arrest. You can hate me later. But right now, you need to move, or your son will die." "No," Beatrice swatted at him. Sarah grabbed Beatrice's shoulders. "Mrs. van der Hoven, stop it! Let him work!" "Is there any other doctor?" Beatrice screamed at the economy curtain. "Anyone?" Silence from the back of the plane. The man in the grey suit looked at Sarah. "I need the medical kit. I need oxygen. And I need you to restrain the mother if she interferes again." "Who do you think you are?" Beatrice sobbed. The man knelt down, ignoring her, bringing his face close to Arthur's. He checked the pupils. He checked the airway. Then he looked up at Beatrice, his eyes blazing with an intensity that finally silenced her. "My name," he said, clearly and coldly, "is Dr. Solomon Pierce. I am the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. Now get the hell out of my way." The first-class cabin of Flight 882 had transformed from a sanctuary of luxury into a makeshift trauma unit. The soft jazz that usually played during the flight had been cut, replaced by the mechanical drone of the engines and the terrified, ragged breathing of Beatrice van der Hoven. Dr. Solomon Pierce didn't look at her. He couldn't afford to. His world had narrowed down to the small, fragile body of 10-year-old Arthur. "I need the medical kit opened now," Solomon barked at Sarah. "I need the blood pressure cuff, the stethoscope, and I need to know exactly what is in your drug box. Specifically, I need anticonvulsants, diazepam or midazolam. Does this flight carry them?" Sarah's hands were shaking as she fumbled with the latch of the heavy red medical case. I think so, Doctor. We have a standard emergency kit." "Get it out," Solomon commanded, his fingers pressing into Arthur's neck, feeling for the carotid pulse. It was erratic, thumping wildly against the boy's skin like a trapped bird. Arthur's eyes were still rolled back, but now his body began to arch. A guttural sound escaped his throat, and his limbs began to jerk violently. "He's seizing!" Beatrice screamed, lunging forward. "Stop him! He's hurting himself! Arthur, stop it!" "Do not touch him!" Solomon roared, extending an arm to block her without looking up. "Sarah, help me turn him on his side. We need to clear the airway. If he vomits, he chokes. If he chokes, he dies." Together, the large man in the grey suit and the flight attendant manhandled the seizing boy onto his left side. Solomon wedged a pillow behind Arthur's back. He forced the boy's jaw open with a practiced maneuver, sweeping a finger through the mouth to ensure the tongue wasn't blocking the windpipe. "How long has he been lethargic?" Solomon asked, his voice cutting through the panic. He looked directly at Beatrice. "You said he didn't feel good in the lounge. How long before that?" Beatrice was hyperventilating, clutching her diamond necklace. I don't know. A few hours. He complained about a headache this morning." "Did he hit his head?" Solomon demanded. He was shining a pen light from the medical kit into Arthur's eyes. "No, I don't know," Beatrice wailed. "He's a clumsy boy. He's always bumping into things." Solomon froze. He saw it. The right pupil was blown, dilated, and unresponsive to light. The left was pinpoint, anisocoria. "Sarah," Solomon said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low volume. "Tell the captain to climb. We need lower cabin altitude pressure if possible, but mostly I need speed. We have a mass effect. Something is pushing on his brain." "A mass? What?" Beatrice whispered. "Is it a tumor?" "It's a bleed," Solomon said grimly, reaching for the stethoscope. "An epidural or subdural hematoma. He hit his head, Mrs. van der Hoven, and the pressure inside his skull is building every second. If we don't lower that pressure, it will push his brain stem down through the base of his skull. It's called herniation, and it is fatal." Beatrice gasped, her face turning the color of ash. He fell." Solomon stopped. He looked at her. "What?" "In the hotel," Beatrice stammered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. "This morning, he was dragging his feet. I told him to hurry up. I pulled his arm. He tripped. He hit his head on the nightstand. But he got up. He said he was fine. He just cried a little." "He hit his head on a marble nightstand," Solomon repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "And you didn't take him to a hospital?" "We had a flight," Beatrice shrieked defensively. "It cost $12,000. I didn't think it was serious. I gave him some Tylenol and—" She stopped. Solomon's eyes narrowed. He saw the way her eyes darted away. "And what? What else did you give him, Beatrice?" "Nothing. The pupil dilation is uneven, but his respiration is too shallow for just a hematoma at this stage," Solomon said, his mind racing through differential diagnoses. "He's barely breathing. That's a depressant effect." "What did you give him?" "I gave him a relaxer," she whispered. The cabin was silent. Even the Texan man across the aisle looked horrified. "A relaxer?" Solomon stood up, towering over her. "What kind of relaxer?" "One of my pills," she cried. "Just a half. Xanax." He was whining. He wouldn't stop crying about his head. I just wanted him to sleep on the plane. I didn't want him to embarrass me. Solomon closed his eyes for a brief second. The mixture of rage and disbelief threatened to break his professional composure. She had dragged a child with a brain injury onto a pressurized metal tube and dosed him with potent sedatives to shut him up. "You suppressed his respiratory drive while his brain is swelling," Solomon said, his voice cold as ice. "You have essentially turned off his body's ability to fight for oxygen." He turned back to the boy. Arthur's seizure had stopped, but now he wasn't moving at all. He wasn't breathing. "Respiratory arrest," Solomon announced. "Michael, get the ambu bag. Sarah, draw up 0.5 milliliters of epinephrine just in case. But get me the naloxone or flumazenil if you have it. We need to reverse the sedative." "We don't have flumazenil," Sarah cried, digging through the kit. "Then we breathe for him," Solomon said. He grabbed the plastic mask and bag Michael handed him. He clamped the mask over Arthur's small face. Squeeze. Release. Squeeze. Release. "Is he dead?" Beatrice screamed, grabbing Solomon's arm. Solomon didn't pull away this time. He just looked at her, his hands rhythmically pumping air into her son's lungs. "Not yet," Solomon said. "But he's trying to leave. And for the next 3 hours, I am the only thing keeping him here. So you are going to sit down, you are going to shut your mouth, and you are going to pray to whatever God you believe in that I am better at my job than you are at being a mother." Beatrice collapsed into her seat, burying her face in her hands. Time acts differently at 35,000 feet. Minutes stretch into hours. For Dr. Solomon Pierce, the next 4 hours were an endurance test of surgical precision and physical stamina. Arthur was stable, but barely. Solomon had inserted an IV line into the boy's thin arm, a feat of miracle work given the turbulence and the collapsing veins. He was pushing a saline solution to keep the blood pressure up, trying to maintain perfusion to the brain. But the real battle was the breathing. Arthur couldn't breathe on his own. The sedative, combined with the pressure on his brain stem, had knocked out his respiratory drive. Solomon had to manually bag him. Squeeze. 1, 2, 3. Release. Squeeze. 1, 2, 3. Release. His hands were cramping. His back, already aching from the lounge chairs, was screaming in protest as he knelt on the hard cabin floor. "Doctor," Sarah whispered, kneeling beside him with a bottle of water. "Let me take a turn. You need a break." "No," Solomon said, sweat dripping from his brow. "You don't know the rhythm. If you hyperventilate him, you constrict the blood vessels in the brain too much. If you hypoventilate, CO2 builds up and swells the brain further. It has to be perfect." He looked at the boy. Arthur looked so small. He reminded Solomon of his own nephew. Beatrice was watching him. She hadn't moved for 2 hours. She was staring at the man she had called a thug, watching him tenderly, obsessively care for her son. She watched him wipe a speck of vomit from Arthur's chin with his own expensive silk handkerchief, the same one she had sneered at earlier. Why? The word hung in the air. Solomon didn't break his rhythm. Squeeze? Release? "Why what, Mrs. van der Hoven? Why are you doing this?" Beatrice's voice was hollow, stripped of its arrogance. "After what I said. After what I did to you." Solomon looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Because he is a child, and I am a doctor. That oath I took doesn't have an asterisk for the children of bigots." Beatrice flinched as if he had slapped her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was the first time in her adult life she had said those words, and meant them. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize to me," Solomon said, turning his attention back to the monitor. "Save it for him, if he wakes up." Suddenly, the plane banked sharp left. The engines roared. Captain Miller's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding urgent. Folks, we have been granted emergency clearance to divert to Shannon Airport in Ireland. We are descending now. It's going to be rough. I need everyone strapped in. Cabin crew, secure the cabin immediately." "We're landing?" Beatrice asked, hope flooding her eyes. "The descent is the most dangerous part," Solomon warned. "The change in pressure is going to hit his head hard." As the plane nosed down, gravity pulled at them. The turbulence was violent. The medical kit slid across the floor. Beatrice screamed as a coffee pot flew from the galley and smashed against the bulkhead. Solomon didn't flinch. He widened his stance, wedging his knees against the seat frame to lock himself in place. He hunched over Arthur, using his own body as a shield, his hands never leaving the bag. Squeeze. Release. "Hold on, son," Solomon whispered into Arthur's ear. "We're almost there. Just stay with me." The plane shuddered, the landing gear deploying with a heavy thud. The ground rushed up to meet them. Tires screeched against the wet Irish runway, and the reverse thrusters roared like dragons. As the plane slowed to a halt, Solomon finally let go of the bag. He checked the pulse. It was there. Weak. But there. "He made it," Solomon breathed, slumping back against the seat, his hands trembling from exhaustion. Beatrice sobbed, reaching out to touch her son's hand. "Thank you. Oh my God, thank you." The cabin door blew open. Cold, rainy air rushed in. "Paramedics!" Sarah shouted. "Row 1!" A team of Irish EMTs in high-vis jackets stormed the plane, carrying a stretcher and advanced equipment. "What do we have?" the lead paramedic shouted. 10-year-old male, acute subdural hematoma, confirmed loss of consciousness, mixed with benzodiazepine overdose. Solomon rattled off the handoff with military precision. "I've been manually ventilating for 4 hours. Pupils are fixed and dilated on the right. He needs a neurosurgeon and a burr hole within the hour." "We've got him, doctor," the paramedic said, looking at Solomon with respect. "Great work. We'll take it from here." They loaded Arthur onto the stretcher. Beatrice scrambled up to follow them. "I'm his mother," she yelled. "I'm coming." She grabbed her Birkin bag and tried to push past the paramedics. "Mom, you can ride in the jump seat," the paramedic said. Beatrice turned back to look at Solomon. He was still sitting on the floor, surrounded by medical wrappers, his suit ruined, his face grey with fatigue. "Dr. Pierce," she said, her voice trembling. "I will make this right. I promise. I will pay for everything. I will—" "Go," Solomon said, waving a hand. "Just go be with your son." She ran down the stairs. Solomon sighed, leaning his head back against the seat. He closed his eyes, finally allowing himself to feel the exhaustion. "Sir?" Solomon opened his eyes. 2 police officers, Gardaí, were standing over him. But they weren't looking at him. They were looking at the empty seat where Beatrice had been. "Where is the mother?" the taller officer asked. "She went with the ambulance," Solomon said. "Why?" "Captain Miller radioed ahead," the officer said grimly. "About the pills and the injury. That's a crime scene, sir. And we need a statement." The waiting room of University Hospital Limerick was a purgatory of fluorescent lights and linoleum floors. It did not smell like the lavender-infused air of the first-class cabin, nor the expensive leather of the Sapphire Lounge. It smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and impending grief. Beatrice van der Hoven sat on a hard, orange plastic chair that dug unforgivingly into her back. She was shivering violently. Her cream-colored cashmere sweater, the one she had screamed at a stranger for staining, was now ruined beyond repair, stiff with dried wine, sweat, and the grime of the airplane floor. Her hair, usually a helmet of perfect blonde highlights, hung in limp, greasy strands around a face that was stripped of makeup and dignity. She stared at the clock on the wall, The second hand ticked with a mechanical, mocking rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It had been 4 hours since they wheeled Arthur through the double doors marked "Critical Care, Authorized Personnel Only." "Why is it taking so long?" she muttered to the empty room. Her voice sounded brittle, like dry leaves stepping on the pavement. She reached for her phone with trembling hands. She needed Richard. Richard fixed things. That was his job. He fixed hostile takeovers, he fixed bad press, and he would fix this mess in this backward little country. She dialed his private line. It rang once, twice. Then a click. "Richard! Oh, thank God!" Beatrice sobbed into the receiver. "Richard, it's been a nightmare. The airline was incompetent, the staff was rude, and Arthur is Mrs. van der Hoven." The voice on the other end wasn't Richard. It was cold, sharp, and female. It was Helena, Richard's personal legal counsel. Beatrice froze. "Helena, put Richard on. Immediately. I don't have time for gatekeepers." "Mr. van der Hoven is unavailable to speak with you, Beatrice," Helena said, her tone devoid of the usual sycophantic warmth she used at company Christmas parties. "He has been briefed on the situation by the airline's corporate liaison and the Irish authorities." "Briefed? What are you talking about? I need him to send a jet. We need to get Arthur to a real hospital in New York. The doctors here are—" "Beatrice, listen to me closely," Helena cut her off. "Richard has instructed me to inform you that he is initiating separation proceedings, effective immediately. He is freezing the joint accounts to protect his assets from the inevitable criminal litigation." The room seemed to tilt. "Criminal— what?" "You are toxic, Beatrice," Helena said, and for the first time, Beatrice heard the truth in the lawyer's voice. "The airline has statements. The passengers recorded you. It's already leaking on Twitter. You drugged your son and ignored a head injury to catch a flight. Richard is protecting the firm. He will pay for Arthur's medical care directly to the hospital. But as for you, you're on your own. Do not call this number again." The line went dead. Beatrice stared at the phone. She tapped the screen, but it stayed black. "No," she whispered. "No, you can't do this to me. I'm his wife." She stood up, pacing the small room, her heels clicking frantically. She was Beatrice van der Hoven. She couldn't be discarded like this. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. The double doors swung open. Beatrice spun around, desperate for news. A man in green surgical scrubs stepped out. He was older, with thick glasses and a weary expression. This was Mr. O'Connor, the lead neurosurgeon. "Is he awake?" Beatrice demanded, rushing toward him. "Can we leave? I need to get him out of here." Mr. O'Connor stopped, looking at Beatrice over the rim of his glasses. He didn't look at her like she was a wealthy patron. He looked at her like she was a specimen under a microscope. "Mrs. van der Hoven," he said, his Irish accent thick but his words precise. "Your son is in a medically induced coma. We performed a craniotomy to relieve a massive subdural hematoma. We removed a blood clot the size of a lemon from the surface of his brain." Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. A lemon?" "The pressure was immense," O'Connor continued, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "The brain stem was beginning to herniate. If he had arrived 20 minutes later, he would be brain dead. As it stands, the next 48 hours are critical. We do not know the extent of the hypoxic damage caused by the respiratory arrest." "But he'll be fine, right?" Beatrice pressed, her eyes darting around. "He's strong. He takes vitamins. He stopped breathing because of the sedatives in his system, Mrs. van der Hoven," O'Connor said, stepping closer to her. "The toxicology screen came back 10 minutes ago. High levels of alprazolam, Xanax, in a 10-year-old boy with a concussion." I gave him a little to sleep," Beatrice stammered, backing away. He was crying. He was crying because his brain was bleeding, O'Connor snapped. And you sedated him. I have been a surgeon for 30 years, madam. I have seen accidents. I have seen tragedies. But I have rarely seen such callous negligence. How dare you speak to me like that? Beatrice shrieked, her fear turning into defensive rage. I am a good mother. I gave him everything. Private schools, vacations. Who are you to judge me? I am not the one who will be judging you, O'Connor said calmly. He looked past her, toward the waiting room entrance. Beatrice turned. Standing there were 3 people. 2 were uniformed officers of the Garda Síochána, the Irish police, tall, imposing men with high visibility vests. Between them stood a woman in a sharp grey blazer, holding a thick file folder. The woman stepped forward. She had eyes like flint. Beatrice van der Hoven? She asked. Yes. Beatrice straightened her spine, trying to summon the imperious armor she wore like a second skin. And who are you? If this is about the customs declaration, I can pay the fine. The woman didn't smile. I am Detective Inspector Siobhan O'Malley. These are Officers Byrne and Kelly. And this is not about customs. O'Malley opened the folder. She pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small orange prescription bottle. Beatrice recognized it immediately. It was her Xanax. We recovered this from your carry-on bag, which was seized as evidence upon landing, O'Malley said. The name on the prescription is yours. The pills inside match the substance found in your son's blood. I have a prescription, Beatrice said, her voice rising an octave. It's legal. Not for a child, O'Malley said, and certainly not for a child suffering from head trauma. The detective inspector took a step closer, invading Beatrice's personal space in a way that made the socialite shrink. We have spoken to the flight crew. We have spoken to the passengers. And we have a sworn statement from Dr. Solomon Pierce. Beatrice flinched at the name. Dr. Pierce detailed how you actively obstructed medical treatment, O'Malley continued, reading from a sheet of paper. How you refused to acknowledge the injury. How you admitted, in front of witnesses, that you knew he had fallen and hit his head. Yet you chose to board a transatlantic flight instead of seeking help. I didn't know it was that bad, Beatrice cried. Tears streaming down her face, real tears of terror now. I thought he was just being dramatic. He's always dramatic. Your son nearly died, Mrs. van der Hoven, O'Malley said, closing the folder with a snap. And frankly, the only reason he isn't in the morgue right now is because the man you racially abused happened to be a world-class neurosurgeon. O'Malley nodded to the 2 officers. Beatrice van der Hoven, Officer Byrne said, stepping forward and unhooking a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. I am arresting you for child endangerment, reckless endangerment of life, and the administration of a noxious substance. No, Beatrice gasped, backing into the plastic chairs. She knocked over a stack of magazines. No, you can't. Do you know who my husband is? He'll destroy you. I'm an American citizen. You can't touch me. This is Ireland, ma'am, Officer Kelly said, grabbing her left arm, and the law applies to everyone here. Get off me, Beatrice screamed, thrashing as they grabbed her wrists. The cold steel bit into her skin, tighter than any bracelet she had ever worn. Richard, help me. Somebody help me. She was making a scene. The few other people in the waiting room, exhausted families waiting for their own tragedies, watched in silence. There was no pity in their eyes, only judgment. As the officers began to march her toward the exit, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. Beatrice looked up, desperate for a savior. It was Dr. Solomon Pierce. He had changed out of his ruined suit. He was wearing a pair of borrowed blue hospital scrubs and a white coat that was slightly too small for his broad shoulders. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he held a cup of cheap vending machine coffee. He stopped when he saw them. He saw the handcuffs. He saw the ruined woman. Beatrice stopped struggling. She went limp in the officer's grip. "Doctor!" she wailed, her voice cracking. "Dr. Pierce, please!" Solomon slowly walked toward them. The officers paused out of respect, allowing the interaction. "Tell them," Beatrice begged, snot running down her nose. "Tell them I was scared. Tell them I didn't mean to hurt him. You saved him. It's okay now, right? He's alive. Please tell them to let me go." Solomon looked at her. His face was unreadable. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked profoundly sad. "He is alive, Beatrice," Solomon said, his voice deep and steady, echoing in the hallway. "But he is alone. He woke up for a few seconds before the surgery. Do you know what he asked?" Beatrice shook her head, sobbing. "He asked if you were mad at him," Solomon said. The words hit Beatrice harder than a physical blow. She doubled over, a guttural sound escaping her throat. "He was afraid of you," Solomon continued, his voice hardening. "Not the pain. Not the dying. You. You made your son believe that his inconvenience was a greater sin than his own death." "I'm sorry," Beatrice whispered, falling to her knees, the officers holding her up. "I'm so sorry." "You aren't sorry for what you did," Solomon said, looking down at her. "You're sorry that the world finally saw who you are." He looked at Detective O'Malley and nodded. "Take her!" "No! Solomon, please!" Beatrice screamed as the officers hauled her to her feet and dragged her toward the automatic doors. "That's Dr. Pierce to you," he said quietly, turning his back on her. He walked toward the ICU doors, swiping his access card. He didn't look back as Beatrice van der Hoven was dragged out into the cold Irish rain, screaming for a life she had forfeited the moment she chose a seat in first class over the life of her child. The sliding doors hissed shut, cutting off her screams, leaving the waiting room in a heavy, final silence. Solomon took a deep breath, adjusted his stethoscope, and walked into the ICU to sit by the bedside of a boy who finally had someone watching over him. 6 months later. The video didn't just go viral. It became a global indictment. It had been filmed by the teenage influencer in seat 3A, a shaky, vertical iPhone video that captured everything. The internet saw the high-definition footage of Beatrice screaming at a man she called a janitor. They saw her physically blocking a doctor from saving her dying son. They heard her admit to drugging a child to keep him quiet. The video, entitled Karen Almost Kills Son on Flight 882, had amassed 84 million views in 3 weeks. Beatrice van der Hoven sat on the edge of a sagging, second-hand sofa in a basement studio apartment in Astoria, Queens. The air smelled of damp drywall and cat litter, a smell that permeated the hallway from the neighbor's unit. It was a far cry from the penthouse on Park Avenue. The fall had been swift and brutal. Richard van der Hoven hadn't just divorced her, he had erased her. Citing the morality clause in their prenup and the catastrophic damage to his firm's reputation, Richard's lawyers had left Beatrice with nothing but her clothes and a settlement that barely covered her legal defense fees. But the poverty wasn't the worst part. The silence was. Beatrice took a bite of her microwave lasagna. It was rubbery and cold in the middle. She chewed mechanically, her eyes fixed on the small television set she had bought from a pawn shop. Tonight was the Global Humanitarian Awards Gala, broadcast live from Geneva. Beatrice watched the screen, mesmerized by a life she used to own. She saw the glint of diamonds, the flash of paparazzi cameras, the clinking of crystal flutes. Then the camera cut to the podium. "And now," the announcer's voice boomed, rich and celebratory, "for his groundbreaking work in pediatric trauma and for his heroic actions that captured the world's attention aboard Flight 882, we are honored to present the Physician of the Year award to the newly appointed Surgeon General, Dr. Solomon Pierce." Beatrice stopped chewing. The screen filled with the image of Solomon. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit his broad shoulders perfectly, a stark contrast to the rumpled grey suit he had worn that day in the lounge. He walked to the microphone, the applause in the hall deafening. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. He smiled, not with arrogance, but with a deep, genuine warmth. "Thank you," Solomon said, his voice calm and commanding. "This award isn't for me. It's for every person who chooses to help when it would be easier to look away. We live in a world where it is easy to judge by appearances. But character is what remains when the turbulence hits." Beatrice felt a physical pain in her chest. The camera panned to the audience. Sitting in the front row, clapping enthusiastically, was a man Beatrice recognized. It was Richard. And sitting next to him, looking healthy, vibrant and happy, was Arthur. Arthur was wearing a small tuxedo. He was laughing at something Solomon said. He looked safe. Beatrice reached out and touched the screen, her finger tracing the outline of her son's face. She had lost him. Not to death, but to the consequences of her own heart. The family court judge had been merciless. Citing severe psychological and physical endangerment, Beatrice had been stripped of all custody. She was allowed one supervised visit a month for 60 minutes. The last time she saw Arthur, he had flinched when she tried to hug him. He had looked at the social worker, asking if he could go home to his aunt, who now raised him. On the screen, Solomon raised his trophy. "To the survivors," he said. Beatrice looked around, her dim, cramping apartment. The stained carpet, the pile of unpaid bills on the counter, the silence that was so loud it rang in her ears. She realized then that karma wasn't some cosmic force that struck you down with lightning. It was far more cruel. Karma was the mirror. It was forcing her to sit in the wreckage of her own making, watching the people she deemed inferior rise to heights she could no longer reach. She had treated a king like a servant, and in doing so, she had become the peasant in her own story. Beatrice turned off the TV, plunging the room into darkness. She sat there for a long time, listening to the sirens wailing outside in the city, a city where she was no longer Beatrice van der Hoven, the socialite. She was just a woman who had spilled a drink and washed away her entire life. And that is the story of Beatrice van der Hoven. She learned the hard way that character isn't defined by the price of your ticket or the color of your skin, but by how you treat people when you think no one is watching. Dr. Pierce saved a life that day, but Beatrice lost hers. Not her heartbeat, but her world. It's a brutal reminder. Be kind, because the person you humiliate today might be the only one who can save you tomorrow. If this story gave you chills, or if you think justice was served, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. What do you think? Did the punishment fit the crime, or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story where karma comes knocking. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.